Coming home early to surprise my wife, Clara, was supposed to be romantic. Instead, I walked into a nightmare that would destroy my marriage, bankrupt me in court, and turn my own family against me. But they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated what a broken man could rebuild. My name is Arthur Vane. I'm 42 years old. And until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I worked as an HVAC technician for Alistair's Climate Solutions here in Springfield, Missouri. Not the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills and kept our 3-bedroom ranch house comfortable year-round. Clara worked part-time at a dental office downtown, more for the social interaction than the money since my salary covered most of our expenses. We'd been married for 12 years, together since our late 20s. Leo, our 8-year-old son, was the light of our lives. At least, I thought he was the light of both our lives. Turns out I was only half right about that. Our routine was solid, predictable. I'd wake up at 6 o'clock, grab coffee with Clara while she got Leo ready for school, then head out to fix heating and cooling systems around town. Evenings were family time, homework help, dinner together, maybe a movie on weekends. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, stable, or so I believed. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. I'd been scheduled to service a commercial unit across town, but the client called and postponed until Thursday. George Alistair, my boss, told me to take the afternoon off since we were caught up on service calls. Perfect opportunity to surprise my family, maybe take Leo to the park when he got home from school. I stopped by the hardware store and picked up those special light bulbs Clara had been asking for. The ones for her reading lamp that cast that warm, cozy glow. Small gesture, but I'd learned over 12 years of marriage that little thoughtful acts meant everything. Pulling into our driveway around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I noticed Marcus Thorne's pickup truck parked across the street. Marcus was our neighbor from 2 houses down, a construction foreman who'd helped me install our deck last summer. Nice enough guy, divorced, lived alone. Nothing unusual about seeing his truck in the neighborhood. I used my key to enter through the front door, calling out as I stepped inside. Clara, honey, I'm home early. Got those bulbs you wanted. Silence. The house felt different somehow. Not empty, but charged with an energy I couldn't identify. I set the bulbs on the kitchen counter and listened. That's when I heard it. Voices coming from our bedroom. Low, intimate conversation mixed with sounds that definitely weren't typical afternoon activities. My stomach dropped like I'd stepped into an elevator shaft. Every rational part of my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe she was sick and Marcus was helping somehow. Maybe they were moving furniture. Maybe there was some perfectly innocent explanation for why my wife and our neighbor were behind our closed bedroom door in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. But deep down in that primitive part of your brain that recognizes danger before your conscious mind catches up, I already knew the truth. I walked down the hallway like a man heading to his own execution, each step heavier than the last. The bedroom door was slightly open, and through the gap, I could see everything I needed to see. Clara and Marcus, tangled together in the bed I'd bought for our 10th anniversary, completely oblivious to my presence. The same bed where we'd talked about our dreams, where we'd comforted Leo during thunderstorms, where I'd held my wife during her mother's funeral last year. The hardware store bag slipped from my hand. Those expensive light bulbs hitting the hardwood floor with a sound like my world shattering. They heard the light bulbs hit the floor. The intimate sound stopped instantly, replaced by frantic scrambling and whispered curses. I stood frozen in that doorway, watching my 12-year marriage dissolve in real time. Arthur, Clara's voice came. Out sharp, irritated rather than embarrassed. Not guilty, not ashamed, just annoyed that I'd interrupted her afternoon entertainment. Marcus Thorne scrambled for his clothes like the house was on fire, his face red with embarrassment. At least one of them had the decency to look mortified. Arthur, man, I can explain, he started, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Just don't. Clara pulled our bedsheet around herself and sat up, fixing me with a look I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, like she was deciding how much effort this situation deserved. You're home early, she said, as if that was the real problem here. Not the fact that she was in bed with our neighbor. Not the betrayal or the lies, just my poor timing. Yeah, I replied, still staring at this stranger who looked like my wife. I am. Marcus finished pulling on his shirt and edged toward the door. I should go, he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. This is between you two. He brushed past me, and I caught the scent of Clara's perfume on his clothes. My stomach turned. How long had this been going on? How many Tuesday afternoons had I been fixing air conditioners while they were destroying my marriage in the bed I'd saved 3 months to buy? Arthur, sit down, Clara said, her tone shifting to what I recognized as her management voice, the same tone she used when explaining complicated insurance procedures to confused patients at the dental office. We need to talk about this like adults. Like adults. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about adult behavior? Don't take that tone with me, she snapped. Things between us haven't been good for months. You know that. We've been living like roommates, not husband and wife. The audacity hit me like a physical blow. She was making this my fault. 12 years of marriage, and somehow her affair was because I hadn't been attentive enough. So, you decided to fix our marriage by sleeping with Marcus Thorne? I decided to find someone who actually sees me as a woman instead of just Leo's mother and your housekeeper. That stung, because there was a grain of truth in it. I had been working longer hours lately, picking up overtime to save for Leo's future, but I thought I was being responsible, providing for my family. What about Leo? I asked. What happens to our son when this all falls apart? For the first time, something flickered across her face. Doubt, maybe, or guilt, but it passed quickly. Leo will adjust, she said. Kids are resilient. He'll be fine as long as we handle this maturely. Handle this maturely. Like she'd given me a choice in how to handle coming home to find my wife in bed with another man. I looked around our bedroom. The photos of our wedding, Leo's baby pictures on the dresser, the life we'd built together scattered around like evidence of something that had never really existed. I'm going to pick up Leo from school, I said. When I get back, I want you to be gone. Arthur, don't be dramatic. We can work through this. No, I said. And for the first time since walking into this nightmare, I felt certain about something. We really can't. I drove to Leo's school in a haze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Every traffic light felt like an eternity, giving my mind too much time to replay what I just witnessed. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how casual Clara had been about it, like she'd been planning this conversation for months. My phone buzzed with texts. Clara, no doubt, trying to control the narrative before I could process what had happened. I didn't look. Leo bounded out of Roosevelt Elementary with his usual 8-year-old energy, backpack bouncing, shoelaces untied. His face lit up when he saw me instead of his mom. Dad, you pick me up. Are we going somewhere fun? Looking at my son, our son, I felt something shift inside me. This innocent kid had no idea his world was about to explode. Whatever happened between Clara and me, Leo didn't deserve to become collateral damage. How about we grab some ice cream and have a talk? I said, ruffling his brown hair. Ice cream on a Tuesday? Mom's going to be mad. If only that was the worst of our problems. We sat in the parking lot of Dairy Dream, watching Leo demolish a chocolate sundae while I tried to figure out how to explain that his parents' marriage was over. How do you tell a third grader that the stability he's known his entire life just disappeared? Dad, you look sad, Leo said, chocolate smeared on his chin. Did something bad happen at work? Son, your mom and I are going through some grown-up problems. I started carefully. We might not be living together for a while. His spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. Like Tommy's parents? They got divorced last year. Kids notice everything. Maybe like that, buddy. But no matter what happens, you're the most important thing in the world to both of us. Is it because I left my bike in the driveway again? My heart shattered. No, Leo. This has nothing to do with you. Sometimes adults make mistakes, and this is one of those times. When we got home, Clara's car was gone. She left a note on the kitchen counter, gone to stay with Beatrice. We'll talk lawyer to lawyer from now on. Don't poison Leo against me. Don't poison him against her. As if I needed to do anything beyond tell him the truth. 3 weeks later, I was sitting across from Eleanor Vance, the best divorce attorney in Springfield that I could afford, which wasn't saying much on an HVAC tech salary. Mr. Vane, Eleanor said, reviewing the papers Clara's lawyer had filed. I have to be honest with you. Your wife has engaged some serious legal firepower. Whitmore, Davies, and Associates, the kind of law firm that charged more per hour than I made in a week. Somehow, on a dental office receptionist salary, Clara had managed to hire lawyers who usually handled corporate mergers. How is she paying for this? I asked. That's a good question. Either she's taken on significant debt, or someone else is funding this fight. The papers painted me as an absent father and neglectful husband. According to Clara's version of events, I was so obsessed with work that I'd emotionally abandoned my family. Her affair wasn't mentioned, just irreconcilable differences and my supposed failure to prioritize our marriage. They're asking for primary custody, the house, alimony, and child support, Eleanor continued. Plus, they want you to cover their legal fees. Can they do that? They can ask for anything. Getting it is another matter. But Arthur, I need you to understand this isn't going to be a friendly divorce. They're coming for everything. The preliminary hearing was a nightmare. Clara sat beside her attorney, looking like the victim of my supposed neglect, dabbing her eyes with tissues. Her sisters, Beatrice and Cecilia, had given statements about my workaholic tendencies and how I'd emotionally withdrawn from the family. Your Honor, Clara's attorney argued. My client was forced to seek emotional support elsewhere due to her husband's complete disengagement from their marriage. Forced to seek emotional support. That's what they were calling adultery. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, I worked overtime to save money for my son's future. I fixed air conditioners and heating systems to provide for my family. If working hard to support the people you love makes you a bad husband, then I guess I'm guilty. The judge's expression didn't change, but I caught something in his eyes. Maybe recognition, maybe respect. Mr. Vane, do you have evidence of these alleged infidelities? I have my own testimony, Your Honor. I walked into my bedroom and found my wife with another man. Objection. Clara's lawyer jumped up. Hearsay and inflammatory. Overruled. Mr. Vane witnessed this firsthand. Small victory, but I take it. Walking out of that courthouse, I realized this wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was war. And Clara's family was bringing everything. They had to destroy me. Living in Robert Finch's spare bedroom felt like purgatory. My best friend since high school had offered me his couch when I'd lost the house temporarily during the custody dispute. But sleeping in a room that smelled like his teenage son's gym clothes wasn't exactly the fresh start I'd envisioned. 3 months after catching Clara with Marcus, I was barely keeping my head above water. The legal fees were drowning me. Between attorney costs and the temporary support payments the court had ordered, I was working 70-hour weeks just to break even. George Alistair had been understanding about the overtime, but I could see the concern in his eyes when I showed up for the 3rd Saturday in a row. The worst part wasn't the financial strain. It was seeing Leo only on weekends and Wednesday evenings. Clara had moved in with her sister Beatrice, and somehow they convinced the temporary custody evaluator that I was emotionally unstable due to work stress. Wednesday evening pickup at McDonald's was always awkward. Clara would sit in her car while Leo walked over to mine, caught between his parents like a tiny diplomat. Tonight, he climbed into my truck looking more serious than any 8-year-old should. Dad, Mom says you might have to move far away because you can't afford to live here anymore. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Clara was feeding him lies, preparing him for the possibility that she'd get full custody and could relocate wherever she wanted. Son, I'm not going anywhere. This is our home, and I'm going to fight to stay close to you. Promise. I promise. But sitting in Robert's driveway later that night, I wasn't sure how I could keep that promise. Clara's family had deeper pockets than I'd realized. Her father, Victor, worked for some regional insurance company, and between him and her sister Beatrice's husband, they were funding a legal war I couldn't afford to fight. Robert found me sitting in my truck at midnight, staring at the child support calculation that would leave me with about $400 a month after all obligations. Come inside, man, Robert said. You're going to drive yourself crazy doing math in your truck. I can't win this, Robert. They've got unlimited resources, and I'm one emergency repair bill away from bankruptcy. So what are you going to do? Give up? The question hit me like a slap. Was I going to give up? Let Clara and her family steamroll me because they had better lawyers? No, I said, something hardening in my chest. I'm going to figure out how to fight smarter, not just harder. That night, I started researching everything I could about divorce law, custody battles, and financial planning. If I couldn't afford to pay lawyers to think for me, I'd learn to think for myself. 2 weeks later, I discovered just how deep Clara's deception ran. While organizing paperwork for my attorney, I found credit card statements I'd never seen before. Cards open in my name with balances totaling over $30,000. Eleanor Vance's face went grim as she reviewed the documents. Arthur, did you know your wife had taken out these credit lines? I've never seen these cards before in my life. The applications show your signature and social security number. According to this, you've been carrying this debt for 2 years. 2 years, the same time frame when Clara had started talking about our financial struggles and suggesting I pick up more overtime work. She'd been spending money I didn't know we owed while making me feel guilty for not earning enough. What does this mean for the divorce? It means we need to investigate whether this constitutes fraud. If your wife forged your signature on these applications, that's a criminal matter. The credit card records painted a disturbing picture. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel charges on dates when Clara claimed she was visiting her mother. Shopping sprees at stores that sold lingerie and men's cologne. Gifts for Marcus Thorne paid for with money borrowed against my name. But the real revelation came when Eleanor's investigator dug deeper into the family finances. Beatrice Maddox, Clara's older sister, wasn't just offering emotional support. She was funding Clara's legal battle through a shell company her husband owned. They've essentially created a slush fund to destroy you financially, Eleanor explained. The goal is to drag this out until you can't afford to fight anymore. Can we prove that? We're working on it. But Arthur, there's something else. The investigator found evidence that your wife's relationship with Mr. Thorne goes back at least 8 months, not 3 like she claimed. 8 months. That meant Leo had been witnessing this affair for most of the past year. My son had been living with the secret of his mother's betrayal, watching it unfold while I worked overtime to pay for debts I didn't know existed. There's more, Eleanor continued. Mr. Thorne isn't just unemployed between construction jobs like he told you. He's got a history of targeting married women in suburban neighborhoods. This appears to be a pattern for him. The pieces were falling into place. Marcus wasn't just a neighbor who'd gotten involved with my wife. He was a predator who'd systematically destroyed my family for his own entertainment. George Alistair's office smelled like coffee and motor oil, the familiar sense of honest work. I'd been putting in 16-hour days for 2 months, learning everything I could about running an HVAC business while fighting the legal battle that threatened to consume everything I'd built. Arthur, George said, setting down a folder thick with financial documents. I've been thinking about our conversation regarding the business. You've proven yourself over the past few months, working harder than any man should have to while dealing with personal hell. I straightened my chair. This conversation could change everything. The truth is, I'm 62 years old and tired. My wife wants to retire somewhere warm, and I want to spend time with my grandkids before they're too old to want me around. George opened a folder revealing business plans, profit and loss statements, and purchase agreements. I'm prepared to sell you the business. Owner financing, reasonable terms. You've got the technical skills, and you've developed the business sense. Question is, are you ready to own something instead of just working for someone else? I thought about the fraud charges we'd filed against Clara, the custody battle still raging, the mountain of legal debt I was climbing. Then I thought about Leo and the kind of man I wanted him to see when he looked at his father. George, 6 months ago, I was a guy who fixed air conditioners and went home to what I thought was a happy family. Today, I'm learning that sometimes you have to tear down everything you thought you knew and rebuild it stronger. Is that a yes? That's a hell yes. We spent the next 3 hours going over contracts, payment plans, and transition timelines. By Christmas, I'd own Alistair's Climate Solutions. Not just a job anymore, but a business. Something I could build, something that could provide for Leo's future, something that belonged to me. Walking to my truck that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, solid hope backed by a concrete plan. I bought my own house and built my company from scratch after everyone betrayed me. The thought came unbidden, but felt right. Clara and her family tried to break me, but instead they'd forced me to become stronger than I'd ever imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor Vance. Fraud charges approved. Clara's attorney wants to meet. They're ready to negotiate. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was negotiating from a position of strength. Robert found me in his garage that night working on the business plan for my new company. "You look different," he said, "like you found your fighting stance." I think I have. They wanted to destroy me financially, turn me into some broken man who couldn't provide for his son. Instead, they pushed me to become a business owner. What's the plan? Simple. Build something so solid they can't touch it. Create a future for Leo that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval or support. I looked at the papers spread across Robert's workbench. Purchase agreements, loan documents, business licenses. 6 months ago, I would have been terrified by this level of responsibility. Tonight, it felt like freedom. The knock on my new front door came on a Saturday morning in May. I'd been living in my own house for exactly 1 week. A modest 3-bedroom ranch that I bought with the savings from my brutal work schedule and the down payment George had helped me structure. Through the peephole, I saw Beatrice Maddox holding what looked like a casserole dish, wearing her most sincere expression. Behind her stood Cecilia, Clara's younger sister, looking nervous and fidgety. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Arthur," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Congratulations on the new house. We brought you a housewarming gift." "That's thoughtful," I replied, making no move to take the casserole. "What can I do for you?" "Well, we were hoping we could talk. Family to family." Family. The same people who had funded Clara's legal war against me were now playing the family card. "We're not family anymore, Beatrice. Your sister made sure of that when she decided to destroy our marriage." Cecilia shifted uncomfortably. "Arthur, we know things got heated during the divorce, but that's all behind us now. We're here because we care about you." "Care about me?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Where was this care when you were bankrolling attorneys to take my son away from me?" Beatrice's mask slipped slightly. "We were protecting our sister. Any family would do the same." "Protecting her from what?" "The consequences of her own choices." "Look," Beatrice continued, "we know you've been successful with the business and everything. We're really proud of you for turning your life around." There it was, the real reason for their visit. They'd heard about my success and suddenly rediscovered their family feelings. "The thing is," Cecilia said, jumping in, "Victor's having some health issues, and the medical bills are really piling up. Clara mentioned you might be willing to help out, considering we're still connected through Leo." Help out? They wanted money. The same people who tried to bankrupt me in court were now asking for a loan because their own financial planning had fallen apart. "How much?" I asked, curious to see how deep their desperation ran. "Maybe 20,000 pounds, Beatrice said, hopefully, just to get caught up on everything. We'd pay you back with interest, of course. 20,000 pounds to the people who'd accused me of being an unfit father, who'd claimed I was emotionally unavailable and financially irresponsible." "You know what's interesting?" I said, leaning against my door frame. 6 months ago, when I was sleeping on Robert's couch and eating canned soup for dinner, none of you seemed to think I deserved family support. But now that I own a business and bought a house, suddenly I'm worth talking to." "That's not fair," Cecilia protested. "We always cared about you." "Really?" "Because I remember Beatrice testifying that I was an absent father who cared more about work than family. I remember you, Cecilia, telling the court that I was emotionally abusive to Clara." Both sisters had the decency to look embarrassed. "That was just legal strategy," Beatrice said weakly. "We didn't mean it personally." "Legal strategy?" I nodded. "And this visit? Is this legal strategy too? Or are you genuinely this shameless?" The answer was no. No to the loan. No to the renewed family relationship. And no to pretending the past year hadn't happened. I'd built something they couldn't touch, couldn't take away, and couldn't control. As I watched them drive away, disappointed and empty-handed, I realized I'd finally won. Not just the divorce, not just the custody battle, but something bigger. I'd won back my self-respect. The entire Maddox clan showed up at my house on a Sunday afternoon in August. All of them. Clara, her sisters, her parents, even Marcus Thorne, lurking in the background like a coward who'd finally realized he'd bitten off more than he could chew. I was in my garage working on the books for Alistair's Climate Solutions, now officially mine as of last week, when I heard the commotion outside. Through the window, I watched them arrange themselves on my front lawn like some kind of intervention squad. Clara stood at the front wearing a dress I'd never seen before, probably bought with money she'd stolen from our joint accounts. Behind her, Victor and Eloise Maddox looked older, defeated. The medical bills and legal fees had taken their toll. I walked outside, wiping grease from my hands with a shop rag. "Arthur," Clara said, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when she wanted something. "We need to talk. All of us. As a family." "We're not family," I replied calmly. "You made that clear when you decided to destroy our marriage and try to steal my son." "Don't be dramatic," Beatrice jumped in. "We're here because we care about you. Look around. You're living in this house all alone. That can't be healthy." "Alone." They made it sound like a disease instead of the peace I'd fought so hard to achieve. "I'm not alone," I said. "I have Leo every other week. I have a business to run, and I have friends who actually support me instead of trying to tear me down." Victor stepped forward, playing the patriarch card one last time. "Son, you're being selfish. After everything we've been through as a family, you're going to turn your back on people who need your help." "People who need my help?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Victor, where was this family concern when I was sleeping on Robert's couch? When your daughter was lying to judges about my character? When you were funding a legal war designed to bankrupt me?" "That was different," Eloise said weakly. "We were protecting Clara." "Protecting her from what?" "The consequences of her own choices." Clara tried a different approach. "Arthur, I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you, but we have a son together. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Our son means everything to me. That's why I fought so hard to keep him in my life when you tried to take him away. We could be a family again," she continued, tears starting to form in her eyes. "People forgive, people move forward. You're successful now. You've proven whatever point you needed to prove." The manipulation was breathtaking. She actually thought I'd take her back now that I had money and stability. Like the past 2 years of betrayal and legal warfare had been some kind of test I passed. "Clara, let me be very clear," I said, looking directly at her. "I built my own house and my own company from scratch after everyone in your family betrayed me. Now you're all furious that I refused to let you back into the life you tried to destroy." The truth hung in the air like smoke from a fire. You had your chance to be family when I needed support. Instead, you chose to be enemies. Now that I'm successful, I don't need or want any of you in my life. I turned and walked back into my house, closing the door on that chapter of my life forever. 5 years later, I stood in the backyard of my new house, a 4-bedroom colonial in the best school district in Springfield, watching Leo practice soccer with a goal net I'd installed last weekend. At 13, he was taller than his mother with my stubborn jaw and an independence that made me proud. "Dad," Leo called out, "Coach Dubois wants to know if you can help with a fundraiser for new uniforms." "Tell Coach Dubois I'll call him tonight," I replied, thinking about how different this conversation would have been 5 years ago when I could barely afford my own groceries. Alistair's Climate Solutions had grown into the most successful HVAC company in 3 counties. We employed 22 people, maintained contracts with half the commercial buildings downtown, and had a waiting list for residential service. I bought George out completely 2 years ago, and the business was thriving under my ownership. The divorce settlement had been finalized in my favor once the fraud charges stuck. Clara got supervised visitation and a small support payment, nothing like the financial destruction she had originally planned. Marcus Thorne had been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and served 18 months in county jail. Last I heard, he'd moved to another state to run his scams on fresh victims. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert Finch. Barbecue at my place Saturday. Bringing anyone special? I smiled, thinking about Dr. Helena Croft, the veterinarian I'd been dating for 8 months. She was nothing like Clara. Honest, supportive, independent, someone who appreciated what I'd built instead of trying to tear it down. Maybe, I texted back. The Maddox family had imploded spectacularly after I'd refused their demands for financial help. Victor's medical bills had forced them to sell their house and move into a small apartment. Beatrice's marriage had fallen apart under the financial strain, and she was working 2 jobs to support her kids. Cecilia had moved back in with her parents and was driving for a rideshare company. Clara had eventually found work as a receptionist at a low-rent medical clinic, living in a studio apartment, and taking the bus to her weekend visits with Leo. She tried calling me twice in the past year, once asking for help with her rent, once wanting to talk about co-parenting more effectively. Both times I politely declined and suggested she speak to our lawyers if she had legitimate concerns about Leo's welfare. "Dad, are you proud of me?" Leo asked, joining me on the deck after finishing his practice. "Every single day, son." "Why do you ask?" "Some of the kids at school say their parents got divorced because their dads weren't good enough. I wanted to make sure that wasn't why you and Mom split up." I put my arm around his shoulders. This young man who was already showing signs of the strength and integrity I hoped I'd modeled for him. "Your mother and I split up because she made choices that hurt our family. But you, Leo, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Every sacrifice I made, every long day I worked, every fight I fought, it was all worth it to build the life we have now." He nodded, satisfied with the answer, and headed inside to shower. I stood on my deck, looking out at the life I'd built through determination and refusal to give up. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in my own house, drive to my own business, and continue building something that belonged entirely to me and my son. For the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly free.